Inertia is the tendency of objects to resist changes in motion. This means that objects don't want to change their velocity. They want to either be moving at a constant velocity or not moving at all. Who has more inertia, Lucy or Belana the dog? Circle your answer on your paper now. Another way to think about the question, who has more inertia, is to rephrase it by saying instead, who is harder to move? Now, Lucy has a mass of 61 kilograms and Belana has a mass of 8 kilograms. So, who is harder to move? Circle your answer on your paper now. Did you say Lucy for both of them? If you did, you're right. Lucy has more mass, and that makes her harder to move. Now, that also means that she has more inertia. The more mass something has, the more inertia it has. Remember, the harder something is to move, the harder something also is to stop from moving. So things with more inertia are harder to speed up, but also are harder to slow down. They are just harder to accelerate in general. So now we've talked about inertia, but what is this force thing and what does it have to do with inertia? Well, a force is a push or a pull on an object, and objects with more inertia require more force to move. Because Belana has less inertia than I do, if we were to both be on skateboards and someone was to give us both a good push, the push needed to make Belana start moving would be much less than the force needed to make me start moving. So now we have a definition of what a force is, but how do we calculate it? What is the formula for force? Force is calculated using a very simple formula. That formula is force is equal to mass of the object multiplied by the acceleration of the object, or F equals m times a. Two ways to think about this. One, if you wanted Lucy and Belana to accelerate at the same rate, the force you would need to push Belana with would be less than the force you would need to push for Lucy. Second, if you wanted to push them both with the same amount of force, Belana would accelerate a lot faster because her mass is smaller. Now that we know more about inertia and forces, let's think about when is a force actually happening? How do we know if a force is acting on an object? Remember, force requires acceleration, meaning it needs the velocity to change. So if the object is still, meaning it's not moving, that means that there's not a force. Whoops, the video was wrong on that one. Sorry about that, y'all. If the object is moving at a constant velocity, again, that should be an example of no force acting on the object. Finally, if the object is accelerating, then we know that there is a force acting on that object. We're going to talk briefly about different types of forces, but we will talk about these later too. So the first one is applied force. So this is just a general term for forces that are acting on an object. Second, we have friction, and friction is a force that works against motion, meaning it slows stuff down. And finally, we have gravity. Gravity is a force that pulls objects together, just like we are pulled towards the center of our Earth due to gravity. Technically, if an object is still, that doesn't mean that forces aren't acting on it. First, gravity is always acting on objects. And second, sometimes things aren't moving because the forces working on trying to move that object happen to be equally balanced. The force that's pushing it is equal to the force that's pulling it. All right, that's it from me today, y'all. It is time for you to practice some of these ideas.